Those Australians are always welcome. Never know what they might come up with. Okay, my friends, let's move on to the class. We've been talking about the book of Revelation, and I posted a link to it on a spiritual site, on a religious site, and I got a really strong criticism because I spelled it Revelations, plural, and it's the book of Revelation, and you don't think of that quite often. And he says, "Well, some expert you are on the book, you can't even say it. Let's see."
You don't even know
He
the
said,
name of it.
yeah, he says it's the book of Revelation, not Revelation. And there was a little typo I made there that really set this guy off, made him feel superior.
Yeah, because you correct a lot of people when they use the word revelations. I've heard you do that.
Yeah, so it's the
It
book.
has a lot of revelations in it.
Yeah, yeah, you think of it as plural when you just think of the book because it's got so many revelations, plural, in it, but it's has a singular title. Okay, we've been talking. We're started Revelation 16 that talks about the seven angels with the seven last plagues, and the interpretation we're given is totally different than the Orthodox. In other words, these seven angels are symbolic of seven labors that the disciple treading the path of Christ eventually faces. And what it is the plagues that's poured out upon the people are the results of karma of those who respond negatively to the messages of the disciples of light. Because what normally happens when someone comes forth with a message with greater light in itself, is it accepted or not?
They reject it like crazy.
Right.
It goes contrary to what they've been taught and the thought forms that have been constructed around their belief system.
Yeah, Galileo is a good example, Abraham Lincoln, Copernicus,
Nikola Tesla.
yeah, Nikola Tesla. Everybody really resisted the alternating current. And Edison, that's interesting that Edison had a man electrocuted with alternating current to demonstrate how deadly it was and scared the dickens out of a lot of people for a while. And when the railroad was first started, they had a couple bridges collapse because they had never built any bridges before for railroad tracks. And the first ones they built collapsed. And everybody thought the railroad was doomed, that there was no way it was ever going to prosper because nobody could build a bridge. Well, people got together and they figured out how to reinforce the bridge and make the bridges work. And then eventually the railroad proceeded. But whenever any change that benefits humanity comes forward, there will be tremendous resistance to it. And well, even the automobile, tremendous resistance to that. A lot of people thought it was totally inferior to the horse, which the very first automobiles were kind of inferior to the horse. And they didn't have any even decent roads to travel on. And so they the automobile itself, which is now just a crucial part of our society, had tremendous resistance toward it when it first started up. It was just kind of people figured it was just a toy for the rich and was never going to go anywhere. But things change. And we have the same problem today. And people think, people see innovative things that happen. Everybody's terrified of AI. A lot of people are. But the powers that be are kind of supportive around it also, so it's not getting the resistance. But it should get some resistance because it does pose some danger if it is misused. So it's always good to be a little skeptical of things. You don't want to be just 100% accepting of something just because it's new. Yeah. But anyway, these seven angels represent seven, and the seven plagues. The first plague we went over last week, that was poured upon those who had the mark of the beast. And there fell a grievous and noisome sore upon those. And what this symbolizes is, and the vial was upon the earth, and this symbolized, as we noted, earthly things, where the disciple presents innovative things like particularly it's noticeable in healing. There's a lot of spiritual people teaching principles about healing that verifies, people have verified from within to be true, but it's completely opposed by the outward authorities. The doctors, medical systems will often oppose innovative things that will be good for our health. And there's all kinds of additives in our food that are poisonous, like yellow dye is put on in a lot of our food, and it's definitely poison in any significant amounts. And we consume this in all kinds of things, put in processed foods, that if you expose the truth of these things, the big corporations will that are selling these processed foods will come down on the people trying to guide people toward good health. And many people that have been pioneers of healthy living have faced jail time and persecution and loss of their license and all kinds of things. So, but the repercussions, those who have the mark of the beast have, is they'll suffer from ill health and the ill effects of going against this light. The light could have made things a lot easier, made everybody a lot healthier. But if they eat all these Twinkies and Pop Tarts and things like that, they'll wind up with the grievous problems on a physical level. Now that's just one thing. Now there's all kinds of other things in science, education, politics, where the mark of the beast is the person substitutes the God within for the God without. So the authorities without tell people what they're supposed to think and how they're supposed to act. And if you have an authority from within that says something different, and then you challenge that, you will be attacked. And but the ones that suffer from it eventually are the ones that refuse to go within, because if they refuse to go within and get confirmation, then they will suffer the cause and effect of their own false beliefs. And that's what is meant by that these men will have this grievous sore. And then the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became the blood as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be a literal interpretation. We're not going to have every living soul die in all of our oceans. We're not, all the fish are not going to die there, but as it pertains to the work of the disciple. Now, the first one, poured out his vial upon the earth. So this pertained to regular earthly wisdom. The second one upon the sea, and sea and water is symbolic of the emotions. So by pouring out his second vial upon the sea, it meant this is where the conflict takes place. And the sea that it talks about is the lower emotional nature. You have two types of emotions within you, one connected to the solar plexus and the other connected to the heart. The solar plexus is the seat of the lower emotions, and all the negative emotions come from there, like anger and hate and jealousy, that type of thing. But you also have positive emotions come from there, typical romantic love, the lower aspects of love, and general happiness and well-being, uh, good feelings. So the positive and negative of the lower feelings come from there, and they dominate most people. The higher feelings come from the heart, and in the heart area, you have the true feeling of what love really is. And the lower feeling of love is where the person feels that they love somebody because of what they can do for them. I love you because you're beautiful, because you're rich, because you give me so much stuff, you fulfill me. Okay, that's the lower aspect of love. The higher aspect of love is a desire to serve, a desire to help, a desire to elevate other people, a desire to be one with them and share with them. These are the true heart energies. But in most people, the lower desires dominate, and the lower desires gravitate to the mark of the beast. In other words, the lower desires, and this is the mark of the beast and the as it pertains to the lower nature, is that the feeling nature doesn't have faith in the God or the Christ within the heart. It has faith in the outward authorities that take the place of the God within. So the beast being relying on the outer gods, those that take the place of God, which can be a priest, a politician, a book, even the Bible that's taken too literally. All these things are the mark of the beast if they run contrary to the message you receive from within. So the second angel poured his vial upon the sea, and what this represents is the lower emotions. The person is controlled by his lower emotions, and his lower emotions reject the God within and lean on the God without. And what happens is every living thing that's in the sea dies. So the uh, the connection between you and God is severed when this vial is poured out upon the sea. And so this, if you lean on the lower emotions, which lean on outward authorities, then you will be severed from the God within.
Does this also mean that you have to put to death your attachment to your lower emotions, that they die as you surrender to like the heart center and the higher centers?
Yeah, exactly. And Jesus said this about this principle. He said, if a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch and is withered. and men gather them and cast them in the fire, and they are burned. Okay, so he said, "I'm the branch, and you are. I'm the vine, and you are the branches." So the Christ within you is the vine, and if you want to have life within you, you have to have that connection. If you're relying on the outer authorities, that connection within you will be severed. But if you keep the connection from within, you don't destroy the lower feelings, but the lower feelings are mastered. Your lower feelings are not, uh, bad unless they're put to a negative use. But the higher self knows how to put those lower feelings into a positive use. And so when the connection is made, then life in the sea becomes abundant. When the connection is severed, all life, which is in the sea or the lower emotional body, begins to die and wither and be of no use to God or man, so to speak. Okay, any comments or questions on that so far?
I have kind of a comment question.
Okay.
So I've been reading Rule 10 in the book of White Magic. I know it's not Revelation, but it deals with like the astral realm and etheric energy and things like that.
Yeah.
And would you say that like if the disciple or the aspirant doesn't like move, like reorient their control center from the solar plexus then, or like the sea of lower emotion, like would the kind of like etheric life energy of the planet be like going away kind of with, I mean, just like you were saying, like that energy that gives us life and helps us move and progress in evolution would start to fade away. And that's kind of what's going on. And do you think that's going on like on a mass scale at this point? Because there's so many ways in which like we're fed kind of numbness, people want to check out of life and things like that.
You might be referring to prana there, the life energy. We get prana from our food, from the sun, from the earth itself. And we have the circulation of energy throughout our entire being. But then when we uh, put our attention on the lower self and let the lower self be controlled by what the outer authorities say, then it produces blockages. The higher energy that's in circulation reaches blockages. And when there's blockages of energy in your body, then that produces ill health and all kinds of problems. Not only ill health physically, but ill health emotionally, emotional disturbance. And then it's like uh, cause and effect here. Once you create additional emotional disturbance, that increases the disturbance in the body. So it produces all kinds of problems to have this flow of energy disrupted. So basically, if the natural energies that come into our system are able to circulate without being impeded, you'll have good health to the end of your life, pretty much. But if there's some problem, then there's always it's a problem of energy more than anything. If a person has ill health, and if you'll find you can kind of look at different times in your own life, probably when you were faced with a decision that you felt within you need to go one way and you had a lot of outward pressure telling you to go another way. And if you went with the outward pressure, it was like your energy was sapped, and you just, first of all, that's the first thing you'll notice is a lack of energy and enthusiasm to life will be like drain. I see you're smiling. You identify with that?
Yeah, no, I do. I actually, it just reminded me of the choice that I made this past year to finally be done trying to like fit in and go to BYU.
Yeah.
Because I've tried so many years to do it and could never quite pin down like why I don't do well when I move back to Provo and like go to school there. And I mean, I know obviously like I have my certain qualms and things that I don't necessarily agree with in the church, but I always felt like, why can't I make it work? And I found out
Yeah.
this year that it was really because I was just doing what was expected of me or what I thought was expected of me from
Yeah.
those external authorities. And when I finally decided to leave BYU like for good earlier this summer is when my spiritual progression has like skyrocketed. So
So
I relate with that.
you had the outward forces telling you to do one thing, but inwardly you felt something else. But you
Yeah.
were kind of wondering, well, is my inward guidance right or the outer guidance right? And when you went with the inward, when you do that, you feel a surge of positive energy.
Yeah.
And when you do make the right decision, that's a great part about the right decision is you just really feel that it's right. Now, when you make the wrong decision, you're often not sure if you made the wrong one or the right one. You just in borderland kind of. But when you do make the right decision, uh, you just know it. You can feel it. How about you, Sydney? Do you identify with that? Have you reached a point where maybe you had two decisions to make? The outward authorities pulling you one way, and your inner voice saying, "No, go this way."
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that for me, it was similar to Josh, where there was pressures for me to continue to fit in. For a long time, I was in the nuanced LDS space where I was really helping people make the church work for them still. And then when I expanded theologically, and cosmologically outside of the church, then it was like, okay, that's not my role anymore. And like a lot of people want me to stay in that role because it's really validating towards them because maybe they're nuanced and the church, they find a lot of value in it. And for me, it was like, okay, my role is not to help people stick around anymore, but I do believe that can be a path and a choice that resonates because it was for a long time for me. But yeah, so I have had to stretch out of that role into the role of helping people in their faith expansions, their spiritual journeys, and with these esoteric teachings, bridging things. So yeah, and it was not very supported by a lot of the
Yeah.
outer authorities in my life.
Anyone else have had a crossroad in their life they want to share like that? That you knew that outer pole wasn't quite right, but there was a lot of pressure to go with it, but you chose the inner instead. Or maybe you did go with the outer and then lived to regret it. Any other comments on that direction? How about you, Ed? You seem like type of guy that usually is your own man. Have you ever experienced a time that you had a lot of pull from the outside world to go a direction you didn't want to go?
Well, what comes to mind is when I was 21, I got married, and but a few days before I had the vision of myself going into a dark space,
That's funny.
and it was a very dysfunctional marriage. But I found that it was a karmic debt that I owed, and I was glad to. 8 years later, when I was finished, I felt a certain freedom.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that can happen if you have a bad marriage. At least it's a great learning experience. Yeah, Benji, you learned a lot in that 8 years, didn't you?
Well, I learned a lot about myself and others.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Okay.
learned a lot. I learned a lot more afterward, though. Actually, it was like taking the bars off the cage.
Yeah, when you go through a tough experience like that and then reflect, if you're willing to reflect. Now, some people don't do much reflecting, but if you reflect on it, you can learn a lot, and it can be a big help, that reflection. But it's like Plato. I think it's either Plato or Socrates said, a life unexamined is not worth living. So yeah, it's really important to examine our lives and what we've been through and try to figure out how to do better the next time round. Okay, and the third angel poured out.
Can I say something
Yeah,
about the
okay.
scripture that you just read? I think it's probably one of the most valuable scriptures on physical immortality in the Bible, because when we're disconnected from the source or from the vine, it says we wither and die, which indicates to me that we're operating like on direct current. We only have so much energy in and of ourselves. But when we connect with the spiritual vine of Christ, where he invited us to come and link with him, sup with him, then we we connect with this spiritual flow. It's like plugging in to a circuit, electrical circuit. We have this spiritual energy flowing into our bodies, and we go through kind of a quickening and then an awakening, and then we have this increase of abundant spiritual energy, which can sustain and maintain our physical bodies indefinitely.
Yeah, it's kind of what we're talking about is kind of symbolic of if you cut some roses and put them in a vase, uh, they begin dying, but for the first few days they look just fine. They're
Well,
not.
that's how we are. We look good until we hit about 80 or 90, and well, and then we begin to, you know, pivot down. But if we can connect with the vine, which can sustain our physiologies indefinitely, then we don't wither and die.
Yeah, and it also pertains on the spiritual level. If we're cut off from the source of that inner voice, if we cut ourselves off from it, then our spiritual self withers and dies. So we no longer get spiritual inflow of knowledge, inspiration, higher feelings. All those are cut off, and we're left to the devices of the lower self. So we want to make sure that connection is valid. And what keeps that connection valid is just listening to that inner voice and then follow it. And the trouble is, when the disciple first begins to hear that inner voice, it's called the still small voice in the beginning anyway. And later it becomes like a roaring
Thunder.
thunder or waterfall that drowns out everything else that could interfere. So, but it starts out still and small. And so the disciple, first of all, begins to wonder, am I imagining this or should I really follow it? And then when he does follow it, he gets that flow of life coming and coming through his whole being, enhancing his whole livingness. So he becomes connected to the true vine when he just listens and obeys that voice from within. And the interesting part about that voice is it's a little different for everybody because we're all in different situations, and each situation demands a different solution. So what Ace over here gets for a solution for his situation may be different than Maria and may be different from Curtis, but the inner voice is all from the same source, guiding you with maximum wisdom. And the outer voices are almost always wrong. They're not always wrong. And that's why even with outer voices, if they are right, it will register within. And then say if you go to an Orthodox doctor and he prescribes something and your inner voice is okay with it, well, then go with it. So the outer voices aren't always wrong, but they're wrong a high percentage of the time. But the inner voice is never wrong. But when the inner voice is opposes the outer authorities, then the disciple must go with the inner to keep that connection going.
Well, that's the value of the link up. For us to link up to the fifth kingdom under a member of the hierarchy or a master, there has to be a corresponding inner Christ connecting with the outer Christ, or there won't be a link up. You won't recognize the source when it manifests or it appears.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
anyway,
Move on to the third angel. The third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and the fountains of waters, and they became blood. Okay, the rivers and fountains of waters represent knowledge and teachings of God, which feed the people and stimulate their spiritual life. Okay, so the third angel poured out his vial upon these rivers and fountains of waters. And among those, now remember, it's poured it out upon the people that have the mark of the beast. And the people that have the mark of the beast always go with the outer authorities and don't trust the inner. And so these people that have the mark of the beast have the source of knowledge and higher teachings cut off, because they don't get these from the outer authorities. They only get it, the higher teachings and higher knowledge, when they're able to confirm it from within. And unless they resist the beast, which is the outer authorities, they will have these higher knowledge cut off from themselves. And they rejected that which should give them life. In other words, they reject the inner authority of the Christ within, and so the waters, the fountains of waters, became as blood, or the blood of a dead man, as we talked about earlier. So in some cases in the scriptures, blood is symbolic of life, but here it talks about, in these passages, it compares blood to the blood of a dead man, which is very, very repulsive thing to think about, and has no life in it at all. So in other words, if the person rejects the confirmation from the voice within, then his spiritual life becomes dead and non-existent. He no longer is able to progress along the spiritual path.
so the blood is lacking life, is basically what it's saying.
Yeah,
There's no life in the blood. You're dead. You're dead to the life.
right. His spirit within is like non-existence.
Cut off.
Yeah, it's cut off. And I heard the angel of the water say, "Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and wast and shall be, because thou hast judged this. For they have shed the blood of the saints and the prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy." And I heard another out of the altar say, "Even so, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments." So the followers then of the beast drink the blood, because they seek to injure or shed the blood of the messengers. They seek to slay the messengers every way they can. In times where the power of the beast had complete control, they burnt people, heretics, at the stake. They beheaded them. They fed them to the lions. We're fortunate in this day and age where we have laws that bring that limit the power of the outward authorities to come after you. The way that
the First Amendment.
Yeah, we don't have big arenas where we feed people we don't like to the lions, like in the old days, or public executions where we burn somebody at the stake and have a whole bunch of people gather around and watch them burn. And that was their entertainment back in the Middle Ages. To a large degree. Yeah, could you imagine that back in the Middle Ages, you don't have any TV or internet or anything, and so hey, well, they're going to burn Joan of Arc at the stake here. Let's all gather around and watch her burn and scream and yell. That would be kind of interesting, right? So it brought tremendous crowds. It was big entertainment, but fortunately, we've moved beyond that. But it hasn't stopped the beast and the powers that be from when the disciple brings forth greater light, they will come after that disciple with everything they got. If they could, they'd put him to death immediately. But in the more civilized countries, they have restrictions from doing that, so they do it by subtle means. And there's a lot of assassinations under the table that we don't know about too. You know, there's a lot of natural. They had a plague of a whole bunch of naturopaths just having mysterious deaths. And these were people that opposed the regular medical systems and regular cancer treatments and stuff like that. There was a whole bunch of them just had mysterious deaths, fell off of buildings, were poisoned, or something happened to them. And nobody is able to figure out what caused that. Of course, orthodoxy says, well, that was just something that happened, you know, but there's a lot of things that happen under the table that we don't know about because the inclination of the authorities, the outward authorities that deny the inner voice, they will go after those that follow the inner voice with everything they got. And if they can't do it by law, they'll do it outside the law if they can get away with it. So hopefully they cannot always get away with it.
They're like vampires.
Yeah. Yeah.
Suck your blood.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stories about this is particularly in the health industry. There's tremendous uh, efforts on the part of the outward authorities to keep the big pharma in control, so nobody's able to challenge them. To keep big medicine under control, so and there's tremendous amount of money spent on medicine today that's increased. And if somebody comes forward and develops some cancer treatment that is really cheap, they will be attacked like you wouldn't believe. A lot of people in jail over creating cancer treatments that are better than orthodox medicine, and they come after these people with a vengeance.
Look at all the negative press on ivermectin,
Yeah, and it was cheap.
Yeah, it was a horse medicine, but reduced down, diluted down, it really was effective against COVID.
Yeah, we took ivermectin and didn't get it when it was raging. We got it later on and took some ivermectin, and it was no worse than a regular cold.
Right.
But yeah, it was cheap. Now, and our friends in Nigeria, they say they used ivermectin a lot, and Nigeria got just a small percentage of the deaths that the United States did using orthodox means. So yeah, they really come down on these people, and that, like say, the health industry is one where there's a tremendous amount of money involved. Just to give you an example, when I had an accident when I was 13 in 1958, I was in the hospital for a month. And I had it at the very worst time. My parents got a divorce. My dad took off to South America to look for gold. We had no child support, no income, no welfare, no nothing. And but the only way we could make money was picking fruit. About that time, I was making rockets and had a rocket blow up on me, and I was in the hospital for a month. And do you know what my daily hospital bill was?
$3.
Not quite that good. It's $8 a day. And I had couple of surgeries. I had 6 surgeries altogether, but during that stay, I had one major surgery. It was lasted 8 hours to patch me up, and we paid all that off, working for minimum wage and picking fruit, mowing lawns, different things. Now, I'd call that universal health care. We had pretty much back then. A lot of people, the doctors put them in the hospital for a day just for observation because it was so cheap. But now, even when the insurance pays 80%, your hospital bill is a lot more than $8 a day, which was comparable, less than $100 by today's money. So why did it increase so much? And but because there's so much money involved in medicine, this is a portion of society where the outward authorities want to maintain their grip. They don't want to lose all that money that's coming into the system. And just compare it to one day in the hospital today is at least $2,000 to $3,000. But back when I went, it was $8. And the treatment was as good or better, I think. But so it's a tremendous difference. And it doesn't have to be. We could go back to making everything reasonable again. Okay, any comments or questions before we move on? Well, let me just end with this. Be sure and always go with the inner voice. If your inner voice conflicts with the outer, and even though the outer voices will say, well, everybody agrees with this, so you need to go along. If your inner voice doesn't agree, then go with the inner voice. And now, remember, one of the problems with the inner voice is there's the real inner voice and the false inner voice. There's the false inner voice of the lower emotional self. But that false inner voice usually agrees with the outer voices too. You get the true inner voice when it doesn't always agree with what the outer authorities tell, and it'll have a vibration to it that's different than the lower emotions. Once you get it solidly one time, then you can recognize it, then you know what it is. So if you've never had that, continue to seek it until you get something confirmed from the inner voice that you have proved to yourself is correct.
I find also that there's a greater measure of logic and reason with the higher voice. It makes more sense in an argument.
Yeah, it does. And the outer voices, their logic always has flaws in it.
Yeah, they don't want to argue. They don't want to confront. They don't want to look deeper.
Well, would you say that the outer authorities or outer voices, they function from that lower nature a lot?
Right.
Like from
They
emotion?
function from the solar plexus. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the lower desires, and from the aspect of more selfishness. What's good for, they think of what's good for the me rather than what's good for the whole. Like these people that sell these processed foods, the tobacco companies, nicotine isn't really the enemy as much as what's over 100 different ingredients they put in cigarettes to make them addictive. So it's the other ingredients they put with the tobacco and the paper it's in that makes them more addictive than the nicotine does. And what a lot of these companies did, cigarette companies did when they started to um, uh, realize that their end was near, is they started buying into the food industries and started creating processed foods that had the same addictive ability. So if you're eating a lot of potato chips, Cheetos, Fruit Loops, stuff like that, there a lot of these outfits are controlled by that old cigarette money, and they use their technology to make their products addictive. This is why people are so addictive to junk food, is they have a lot of this junk food has added ingredients to make it addictive. So remember that ad for what does potato chips, and you cannot eat
Can't
just
eat
one.
just one.
Yeah. And that's what they try to do. They try to make them addictive. So you just can't eat just one, you know. And okay. Anything else anyone wants to comment on before we move on?
I don't think tobacco 200 years ago was that bad for you. I mean,
Yeah. Before they put all the additives in.
yeah,
Yeah.
even the paper, if you look at the paper, it has little bitty rings. And when it hits the next ring, it kind of flares up a little bit. So the cigarette you're designed to smoke it really a lot faster. It burns out faster.
Yeah.
So, that's just something that I noticed. Not from my smoking.
Well, the Indians smoked a lot of tobacco before we even got here, and I don't think they ever it got lung cancer or anything.
I don't
But
think so.
yeah.
Mm.